Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the final day of the World Water Week. Hope you've had an impactful week and that there's still some left in your minds and hearts for these next 90 minutes, where we will dive into a very particular part of the water cycle, namely cloudbursts and heavy rainfall. Now, if there's one thing I've learned about cloudbursts is the saying, what exists persists, right? The harder we resist climate action, the harder the elements kick back, and cloudbursts is certainly a stark reminder of this. And it invites us to rethink the relation between cities and water, the topic of today. Now, cities historically are built around water, and Copenhagen and Stockholm are examples of this, right? Copenhagen built on a natural harbor, Stockholm literally the city of water. Now, we used to live according to the rules of water, and with industrialization, we start to write the rules instead. Pump and drain, building rivers or building cities on top of rivers and sort of pushing the water out. And now water is pushing its way back in. And so really the invitation to rethink the relation between water and cities. And will it be confrontation, a game of who will win, water or cities? Or will it be even, dare I say, an upgrade in the way that we transform our cities? Now, my name is Martha Renberg. I'm by no means a cloudburst expert. We have plenty of those on stage joining me in just a while. I'm a political economist, and when I'm not here, I'm advising policymakers out of Brussels. Or I'm a corporate advisor to the corporate sector focused on futurism, futures. So when I look at a phenomenon like cloudburst, it's quite fascinating for many reasons. From a policy perspective, I have never seen an element so ubiquitous and pervasive across many policy documents as water. If you look at the water resilience strategy coming out of the Union just this summer, has anyone up to speed to that strategy? Maybe some at home joining us. I'm going to look at my cheat sheet here because there's so many references to all the different directives that we need to keep track of. Things like the EU Water Cycle Directive seems pretty spot on, but we also have the Flood Management Directive, the Nature Restoration Regulation. We also need to keep track on the EU Vision for Food and Agriculture, the EU Port Strategy, the Clean Industrial Act, the Taxonomy on Sustainable Finance. Those two I've been directly working on. The list goes on and on. Quite overwhelming. But also an opportunity to be creative about which actors we draw into our adaptation work. And that's also a topic we will look at. And a task for us to bring these agendas at the supranational level. Now, this was just the EU, and there's a lot more when we look even more supranationally. And then to bring them back to the local, and even the hyperlocal, which is the second reason I find cloudbursts and heavy extreme rainfall so interesting, because even with the most fancy granular satellites from space or the most supercomputer powered intelligences on Earth, they're impossible to forecast. So how do we adapt and how do we foresee and build solutions for something so impossible to forecast? So, to unpack this question and more, we will have heroes from the city of Stockholm and Copenhagen sharing their adaptation work. We will later also be joined by the Stockholm Environment Institute as well as Zurich Resilience Solutions, that was the one, to also expand even further and look into these questions. Now, the last part is where we invite you, dear participants, and this is where we riff off. We have no idea where we're going. This is you to set the tone and direction, and we welcome you. We look forward to get surprised and take us where the conversation needs to go. But first, a man who's been a champion of adaptation and with a focus on transport for decades. In addition to his role as Vice Mayor of Transport and Urban Environment in the city of Stockholm, he's also chairman of Eurocities, Europe's leading organization focusing on sustainable mobility, amongst other things. So spreading his passion across this continent. And when we look at the cascading effects of cloudbursts, transport is a neat place to start, because that's where you often feel it the first. When the streets are flooded and subways are flooded, entire areas are shut off, even hospitals and critical infrastructure. So that's why we're extra thrilled to have Lars Strömgren with us. Please help me welcome Lars Strömgren. Stage is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished guests, dear friends of water resilience and climate adaptation. I don't think I'm the first one to wish you welcome to Stockholm, maybe the last one, but I hope you've had nice days here in Stockholm. And as you all see, it's impossible to spend time in Stockholm without seeing and being close to water. Stockholm, as we heard, was founded due to the fact that the Baltic Sea and the Lake Mälaren, they met at this very spot that you see on the picture, Slussen. Have you visited that place during this week? Have you seen it? Yes. And water is also a very important part of the identity of growing up in Stockholm. Almost every memory I have from my childhood is from something that has to do with water. You either were swimming or sailing or fishing or just enjoying being close to water. And Stockholm is a city with great ambitions when it comes to sustainability and climate adaptations. Our primary focus in order to tackle the challenges of climate change is, of course, to reduce emissions. But we know and we see already the need for climate adaptation due to changes in the climate. In our region, we already see different changes due to climate, cloudbursts, increased sea levels, heat waves, and different phenomena that forces us to look at these planning issues in new ways. And Slussen as an example, where we see that the rising sea levels in the future might sort of challenge our freshwater reservoir that is necessary for 2 million people or over 2 million people in this area. This can't fail. When Stockholm, or for centuries, the citizens of the islands in the Lake Mälaren, they came with their boats and they sold their goods at Mälartorget and Kornhamnstorg and Munkbrohamnen. And year 2000, at that exact very spot, it was very close that the water ran into the subway system. So the water as a means of transportation was challenging our whole transportation and subway system, and we needed to do something. That was a stark reminder that we need to take these challenges seriously. And to address this, we have recently rebuilt Slussen, the new lock. It has taken some years, and it has been a huge project. But we think now that we have 70 or 100 years where we can prevent seawater intrusion from the Baltic Sea to the Lake Mälaren. And also we have 4 times as high capacity to bring water from Lake Mälaren to the Baltic Sea when that is necessary in order to avoid flooding. The risks of cloud bursts is maybe a newer thing that we look at. It is sort of a difficult task. I'm Vice Mayor for Transport and Urban Environment. I'm Chair of the Transport Committee, and we do have many tools in our arsenal that can address these issues. The streets, the trees, the bridges, and different measures. The city as a whole also has the control over the planning processes, so we control where you are allowed to build and not. And we also uniquely own 70% of the land within the city's border. So we do have a lot of possibilities, but also responsibilities when it comes to these issues and cloudbursts and so on. But it still needs a lot of collaboration. You need to have a holistic approach. And even though Sweden is the country where everything is solved during the coffee break and we love our consensus. It's not that easy when you need to sort of gather different stakeholders, real estate owners, businesses, citizens, and realizing what needs to be done, who should do it, what is the right timing for it, what is the right intervention, and how do we create real value and for whom. There are a lot of questions that we ask ourselves and that we are now engaging actively in different kinds of collaboration and dialogue in order to sort of create a good knowledge base for the city, the different parts of the city, and also different stakeholders within the geography of Stockholm. And I think that's sort of what this issue needs to, how this issue needs to be dealt with. We need to collect data. And as a city, we collect and share data. We create these different ways to collaborate. And we also want to get inspired by other cities, and not the least Copenhagen. We have the privilege to have Copenhagen as an inspirational city. In many different ways. The Transport Committee, I brought them all to Copenhagen last spring, and we enjoyed the bike paths of Copenhagen, the different interventions made due to these floods some years ago, and also how Copenhagen manages to make spending time there always feeling like attending a really good party. So I look forward to hearing more from our friends from Copenhagen and also Jonas Althage from the Department of Transport. And I'm also proud to welcome SEI and Zurich in order to hear how we can intensify our work. And I also hope that you in the audience here or online, that you engage in the discussion of around these issues, because it needs to be discussed. We need to sort of get the common picture of how to solve it, and it's very crucial that we learn how to collaborate, because it's a complex issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you so much. So I can highly recommend not only visiting Slussen, which is just around the corner for those that haven't seen it, these mega projects, but also follow Lars on social media. I've enjoyed that quite a lot. I don't know how many vice mayors are so active in social media, but you're really adamant to showing how also the micro solutions at a local level are not only leading to neat adaptation works, but also upgrades to life in the urban environment. So I can highly recommend maybe some new followers to you after today's session. Now, as mentioned, cloudburst, hyperlocal, require very local solutions, and that's why during these sessions we will, during these talks, look less at the actual solutions, the technical parameters and so on, and more the processes behind, as these are transferable globally, we hope. The methods and particularly the questions. We're the right part of the city organization involved. How do we prepare for rare but potentially catastrophic events like 50 or 100-year events like some cloudbursts can be, right? So let's start with Stockholm, and we'll hear from Jonas Althage. So Jonas is an engineer by training with expertise in hydraulic modeling, flood modeling, with experiences from New Zealand, and I think there's also some Japan experience as well, but based now here in Stockholm. Having prepped for this session with him, I also find him by heart an engineer of collaborations and people, really driven to make sure that those that face the risk own the risk. Please help me welcome to the stage Jonas Althage, Cloudburst Resilience Strategist at the City of Stockholm. Welcome.
Thank you very much for this introduction. So I work at Lars's department, the transport department in Stockholm, which has the strategic responsibility for this question to manage floods. So we are not responsible for investing. We are responsible for furthering how we work to collaborate with external stakeholders and to coordinate this type of work. I'm going to talk about specifically cloudburst flooding today, which I say we have managed now historically flooding from the lake, Mälaren, which affects I think 18 municipalities. Now we're going to move into local critical flood issues and how we try to identify these issues in collaboration with our partners and allow everyone to quicker, more economically, more safely solve these issues. A very, very short look into the legal system in Sweden, which says that every property owner is actually responsible for managing their own flood risk. The city council has a responsibility to get rid of stormwater, 10-year return period flows, that type of stuff. But when we're talking about critical damages, consequences, we're normally focused on the extreme events. The law doesn't either distinguish between a homeowner or, say, the National Defense Headquarters. They have the same ability to force anyone to do something, which is zero, basically. As a local council, we can invest in flood protection if we can motivate a greater need for that investment. So we cannot protect individual property owners who have the legal responsibility to do that themselves, but we can look at how the city is affected, and that's multifaceted. We can look at cultural values, cultural damages, psychological effects of people who are flooded and have to be relocated. The motivation is very wide, and it's up to the different council to motivate what's important to your council. We, as I said, in our work, we're focused on trying to prevent, first of all, the most severe consequences. So we are looking at flood management in this type of setting. This is what we want to achieve, and this ties in with the same process that we work with hostile threats, cyber threats, and any other type of risk. Flood resilience is tied in with the same process as other type of risk management. So we are not looking at eliminating consequences. We are looking at reducing consequences, the magnitude of the damage, but not only that, the time of disturbance that these consequences have, and the much more long-term consequences that are very, very diffuse, hard to quantify, and that no one really talks about when you statistically say what was the damage after this flood. Data gets lost. Some data is easy to compile, some is very hard to compile. So we're looking at the whole cycle of having a reduced capacity. When we're back at full capacity, what is the total consequence and how can we try to prevent that in the best possible way? And luckily, I wrote efficient flood mitigation here. We only need to do one single thing, and that is to agree with everyone on what to do. And obviously, you need to agree with several forums of stakeholders for different geographical areas. And it sounds easy, but getting to the agreement, of course, is affected by a very wide range of factors and parameters that, by experience, can change at any given point in time. Because we have budget processes, we have private companies who are not tied to perhaps the same budget process and investment horizon that a council is. So there's a lot of things that we need to account for, and this is very important when we try to find out how to agree, because all of these factors is something that we need to consider. And what we need to do, what we're trying to do, is to work according to the law and work according to everyone's responsibility and everyone's aim. And the city's aim is to have as little damage as possible. But we need to do this by working with stakeholders, and they are responsible to approach us and ask for collaboration. We cannot go to 1,000 different stakeholders and say, we want to collaborate with you. We don't have the resources, and it's time inefficient, and we have no control over their process. But we're a landowner, 70% of the land, so we have a lot of resources to actually enable physical protection. So what do we need to agree to prioritize? Usually, like I said before, what's easiest to compile is direct economic damage, property damage, for example. So that's one of the, if we choose to call it sectors that we are looking into. But there are, of course, different sectors that are equally susceptible to damage. And this is just a little short picture of a few of the risk assessments we're doing. What we're trying to do is, from the council's perspective, bring about as good data, as good understanding as physically possible to share with stakeholders. And all these risk assessments and the planning data that we develop, we don't do it ourselves. We go to these stakeholders that we know have severe risks and say, what do you need our planning data to include? What do you need our risk assessments to include? And a good example of that is flooding of underground facilities, where we have compiled every surface tunnel entry that is susceptible to flooding. And we've defined, calculated what is the actual flow and volume entering that tunnel. But we then need to move over to identifying risks to that system, and that's not our job. We're not allowed to know the risk of that system because it's sensitive data. We don't know resilience of our stakeholders, how they operate, what kind of spare material, how quickly they can restore their security systems, or even ventilation in a tunnel, because you cannot run a tunnel without ventilation. These are things that we're unaware of, so we want stakeholders together with us to reach this milestone in having the best data available to move on to stakeholder-focused resilience strategies. So every individual stakeholder needs to do their homework, take their responsibility, and find where do we have, if we speak of economic terms, the best possible investment to do. And then, once they know this, they can come back to us. And so when we need to collaborate, I would say that we need to fulfill 4 points in order to agree, to make it easy to agree. We need to have a highly motivated stakeholder. This can, of course, be the council itself as a property owner or operator. The stakeholder needs to be ready to invest. If you come to us and say, we can spend 20,000 euros, we can say, doesn't sound very important. Consequence doesn't sound that great. If we have a highly motivated stakeholder, it's because they have found what we want them to do, to find something that is unacceptable. Not something that is good to get rid of, something that is basically unacceptable for them to have as a risk. Then we have the highest motivation, and we can prove intuitively that there is a high degree of value for the council to engage, because there should be a wider societal benefit to working with this stakeholder. And what we do then promptly is to look at feasibility of a solution. And we do that. We guide the stakeholder and say, with our experience, with our processes, how we manage land, how we need to build, these projects are the ones that are extremely feasible to do, where we probably don't have to spend as much money. And I would say we have several projects where this is the case, that we met these requirements. Because if I want to produce projects, and that's my sole purpose, I'm very fortunate because there are so many problems abound. So we can pick and choose if stakeholders engage. And this is something we want to do. We want to pick and choose, not where do we have the absolute biggest consequence, but where do we have a combination of biggest consequence and a feasible solution. Then we can work with economic investments and get rid of as much high priority consequences as possible quickly. And as we heard before, we've worked very dedicated with lake flooding. We are moving into this space, but since the issues aren't as easily to define as lake flooding, water rises from the lake, these consequences can pop up everywhere. And where we are now is defining our process, helping stakeholders to get this capacity to make these decisions. So we've completed this series, or nearly completed all of these little boxes of risk assessments and investigations that I showed earlier. We've given the information to stakeholders who are now engaged in doing their own in-depth analysis of where their most severe consequences are. We've managed to get 2 collaboration projects started in the design phase, not investment phase. We're designing solutions with a consortium, 2 different consortiums of stakeholders in 2 different parts of the cities, where fortunately both of these stakeholders, they are the one driving this engagement and the need. And this is something this process has to tie in with strategic work on other levels, which one of my colleagues here from the City Executive Office is responsible for doing. So what's important to us is that we get a picture that covers all of the city's priorities. And we do this by integrating with our governing strategies and documents that we produce. So the aim here is get stuff done quicker. That's basically our aim.
What an
Thank you.
imperative. That sounds easy. Get stuff done quicker.
Yeah.
Yeah? Easy. We're about to hear from Copenhagen that in many ways you could see as a front mover, having experienced big cloudbursts. We will hear more about them. Are there some late mover advantages that you see when looking at cities like Copenhagen and the likes that Stockholm can, as seemingly a late mover, could adopt?
Yeah, I think so. What we can take from other cities is, for example, the process of working internally, how they advance their work and motivate their work. If something very severe has happened, if nothing severe has happened, to get those processes internally going. But also some municipalities, for example, in Sweden, have kind of like backtracked a bit from their strategy because they've been focused on economic damage, not legal requirements, and finding these pinpoint massive consequences.
Right.
And that's the aim, like always back to that, where is it easiest to do something? Because we need to motivate and we need to basically force out other investments. So our investments need to replace other investments, and then we need to prove the value.
Again, let's just get to it. There will be questions to Jonas after, if that's okay. So we will have the questions from you guys for the last 30 minutes. So it's a good Q&A. So I hope you can remember your question to Jonas. The last one is cloudburst resilience strategist, urban food strategist. I know you're a lone wolf a little bit. We talked about this, but then you have a capacity to galvanize people around you. Is this morphing of titles, or what's the secret sauce here? What makes you so good at galvanizing people around you?
Well, it's not a personal trait. First, I think it's how my role is designed. My role includes external stakeholder contact, and I have my own budget, which is focused on citywide reducing flood risk. So advancing work and try to reduce flood risk. And external stakeholders is the most important thing to focus on, I think, because they have the most valuable functions, the most valuable services, hospitals, national rail, national roads, power grids. They have the most exposed infrastructure and services. We need to get 50 major stakeholders to start adapting as cost efficiently as possible. If we do that, we have surpassed our own capacity to reduce risk. If we just push these, advance their work a little bit further.
Yeah, by showing them the risks,
Yes.
so that they.
So
own
what
them.
we do, we help them to make assessments,
Yeah.
get as good data and understanding as possible, and collaborating, being an enabler, and putting organizations together to co-invest.
Thank you, Jonas. I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions to you afterwards. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah? There we go. All right, let's move over to Copenhagen. Our next speaker, Anne Lerke Jørgensen, is facing budget negotiations tomorrow, but we're really excited that she can be with us here today and show her the learnings from their strategies. They're in between two strategies, so very exciting. By training, she's an architect and urban designer, specializing in urban analysis and designing public spaces, working in many organizations like Sweco, Metopos, Leva Urban Design, but now since almost 10 years or more so in the city of Copenhagen in different functions. So please give us a warm hand, or give Anne a warm hand. She'll give us a sneak peek into the discussions under the hood.
Thank you. And also, thank you for the introductions. As Märta said, I work at the Technical and Environmental Administration in the city of Copenhagen. And I've been doing so for the last, I think, 13 years, last 8 with implementing our climate adaptation plan. And the experiences about that is what I'm going to talk to you about today. Climate adaptation began for Copenhagen in 2011 with the acceptance of our first climate adaptation plan. It was based on IPCC's fourth report and took into consideration the conservative A2 scenarios, where, or at that point, conservative scenario, where no greater how would you say, reduction in emission of CO2 gases were expected. At that point it was conservative, and now it sadly seems very likable. No, sorry, possible. But for Copenhagen that meant that we would receive 30% more rain over the next 100 years, and it means that we would get more frequent and heavily rain, and we would see a sea level rise of 1 meter in 100 years. While the politicians in Copenhagen were discussing this plan, Copenhagen was hit by a huge cloudburst on the 2nd July of 2011, which was afterwards categorized as a 1,000 years event, flooding most of the city and having damage cost around 6 billion Danish kroner. So of course that made a huge impact on the political willingness to go forward. And they commissioned a cloudburst management plan, which was done in 2012. And in that we state the goals of how we wanted to move forward, and the goals were that we wanted to disconnect 30% of the of the surface area from the sewer, and we would allow sewage discharge to reach ground level once every 10 years, and we would accept flooding above 10 centimeters on the surface only once every 100 years. And from there, we started the next step of implementing the climate adaptation plan and the cloudburst management plan. We worked on that for a couple of years. Doing so, we learned a lot of things, but we started off by dividing the city into 7 big catchment areas and laying down the infrastructure below it, the main infrastructure, who was to drain those catchment areas in event of cloudburst. We also, at this point, made the principles of when we had to make this new infrastructure into the city, we should do it on the surface. We should invest it in the city in things that could be seen and improve the urban environments. We wanted to do it, or the way we wanted to do it was to lay down 4 typologies that could be adapted to the local areas within the city and reflect the local identity within the city at the specific places. It was a typology of delaying the water in basin, basically in green areas. It was retention boulevards, relaying water in the roads, cloudburst boulevards transporting the water on the roads, and then it was delaying and transporting water in these small green roads, which was in Copenhagen a typology that is used mostly on the private roads in housing areas. And because Copenhagen is very flat and we have a trouble getting the water transported everywhere we wanted to, we needed an underlaying piping system to support all of these surface projects as well. When we put these typologies and the principle of wanting to do them on the surface on the city, and of course looking at numerous other aspects, including flood risk assessment and damage costs from the 2011 experience, we got a plan having 300 surface projects, 50 pipe projects, and 6 larger cloudburst tunnels who were going to be built in Copenhagen, mainly on the surface, and in the city of Frederiksberg, which is this grey part in the middle that is enclosed by the city of Copenhagen as well. This plan was made in close collaboration with the municipality of Frederiksberg, but also the 2 utility companies that covers the 2 municipal area. And it was done because new legislation made it possible to co-finance climate adaptation solution through the waterways. And it also made it possible for the municipality to own climate adaptation projects on the surface that has been paid for by the waterways. But all urban improvements were still to be tax funded and put into the annual political negotiation of the city budget. So the waterways could only pay for what was necessary to handle the water, not the urban improvements. And of course that called for a very close collaboration with the other organizations. So as a result of that, the city of Copenhagen had the responsibility to do the climate adaptation planning. It has the responsibility to construct the surface project, but also coordinate projects with various political agendas, and to clarify the potential for added value on the surface, and also facilitating public participation and evaluating it, and also the potential of co-creation with the public. The utility company would have the responsibility to do the hydraulic calculation for everything relating to the existing sewer system, to do the construction of the supporting pipes, here also the 6 large cloudburst tunnels. They will be responsible for the construction that would be on the private roads, what we in the typology calls the green roads. And of course the financing through the water taxes, they would be as well. That called for a whole new way of thinking collaboration between the organization, where it wasn't just working together in project groups to do either the planning or the construction projects, but also involving all aspects of both houses, and very much making it a culture change within the organization. I go back just a little now. When we did the plan with the 300 projects, we immediately thereafter wanted to get started constructing projects within the city. And we did that by choosing a lot of projects that were already politically approved, road project, park projects around the city, and laying down this new requirements for cloudburst management and climate adaptation on them. And we got some very hard-earned experience in the years after that, because of course it was very difficult to change the objectives of those projects when first they have been started. but also we learned that the technical aspects that were behind the plan, the hydraulic data and the knowledge about the coherences between the projects were not detailed enough to start constructing projects on. So in 2018 we divided the catchment areas into cloudburst branches and start looking at the branches more detailed. Getting a better notion of everything technical aspect that we have had to know before starting construction. And when we've done that, we were ready to start building our projects. Doing the master plan on this level also made it possible to assess what kind of values and identities and needs there were in the local areas on a completely other level. And we were able to describe the added value that were needed in that specific place much more detailed than we were before. So 2025 status, we have completed 23 surface projects and 2 of the larger tunnels and a number of the piping underneath. Before 2027, we will have started, not completed, another 58 surface projects, and we will have started the last 4 of the cloudburst tunnels. I want to show you some of the projects that we have been doing, and I will run through them a little bit quickly, but just to give you an image of how they can look. These are all projects that are in low-income areas of Copenhagen. They are urban renewal projects, and they have been financed partly by the water taxes, partly by tax. This is the cloudburst project Grønning, which was done last summer, and it has a purpose of retention and is an urban renewal project as well. I wanted to show you a road project as well. This is the cloudburst project, which is we call ÖVG. It's a whole system of connecting small roads. And its purpose is also to retain water, but also to transport them down the roads to one of these large cloudburst tunnels. One of the ones that has not yet been started, but will do so soon. And the last one is this cloudburst project, also in a green area. It's called Karnsminde. It's in a much more restrained and well-defined green area as Grønning you saw before. It will also retain rainwater quite a lot, around 20,000 cubic meters. And it was an urban renewal project as well. All of these projects were made with a big a big part of public participation as well, and some of them also with co-creational aspects of it. So what we learned that multidisciplinary collaboration is very essential. We learned that climate adaptation projects has a high level of complexity, and planning with synergy takes a long time, also a lot longer than maybe normal, for instance, traffic projects. That it's very important that you have knowledge about the hydraulic connections between projects, and so it goes far beyond the project area that you expect that you will be working in, and you need to have that all clear before you start. And also that the hydraulic needs and potential should be clarified before you plan the synergy with other kind of aspects, and also before you assess the potential for co-creation and the spatial potential that is within the project. So all this we take with us forward when we are due to make our new climate adaptation strategy, which is to be finished next year in 2026. And what we definitely take with us forward is this idea of making the city adaptable to climate change, and by doing it in synergy with other kind of political agendas. And to give something back to the city when you make this huge investment in it on the surface. So we want to improve and the ways that it can give more biodiversity back to the city, and how it wants to improve the green and blue recreational areas within the city. And also how we can use it and reuse the rainwater much more than we do today, for instance, for watering or and bringing down the heat in the city in the summer. Yeah,
Thank you.
that was it. What I
Brilliant.
wanted
Thank
to say.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I have one question for you before.
Yeah.
Denmark is world famous for its institutional dialogue, as we call it. I say we because I live in Copenhagen. I'm a Swede. And something we take for granted, civil society engagement and high trust in institutions. What would you say are the top do's and don'ts within adaptation here to make that work in other places in the world where institutional dialogue isn't that much ingrained?
We consider it in almost every construction project of a certain scale, of course. And the do is definitely to do it very early in the process. Assess your assignment and very seriously discuss and debate how can the public participate in this, what levels can they co-create on, and decide which kind of methods you want to address the public with when you do it. When you do cloudburst projects and these very technical aspects, you have a lot of professions that are very keen to make one good solution and a very technical solution sometimes. And if you get them too involved in the project before you have discussed the way you want to communicate and involve the public, it's very difficult sometimes to change it afterwards.
Yeah.
So do it, and do it very early in the process. There's always something you can talk with someone about.
So that was both the do's and don'ts embedded.
I
Thank you, Anna. We'll invite you back up in just a while. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to open up the discussion even further. We're going to invite a geographer and a risk analyst, an expert to the stage, looking at things like compounding hazards of cloudbursts and cascading effects, as well as how to allocate capital with a vantage point and a sound risk assessment. So first off, we have Carina Barquette, which is the geographer from Stockholm Environment Institute, where she heads the water, coast and ocean team at the headquarters. Now her work spans across Latin America and Europe, but also with some work in Kenya and India and the Baltics, so truly a bridger of the local to the global. We also have Michaela Grunberg, our risk expert, 10 years background in KPMG, now in Zurich Resilience Solutions, the fastest growing unit in Zurich Insurance. And her work is also focusing on making sure that insurance is part of the dialogue very early, to not just price the damages after the events happen, but early on in foresight. So please help me welcome to the stage Carina Barquette and Michaela Grunberg. Good if you move closer because the mics are there. Yes, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we're going to start with a little bit of your reflections on the discussion so far. If we start with the geographer's perspective, Carina, what do you say is a perspective that we need to lay on top of the discussion so far?
Well, it was a fantastic discussion and great presentations by both cities. I am super impressed by the work you're doing, and we definitely need more of these examples. The cities that we work with are actually asking for it, so this was great. I'd say there's, of course, many perspectives you can bring on board, but something we've been working on is not losing sight on the fact that compound effects or compound hazards are on the rise. I know that it might feel a bit daunting to think like we're barely managing that single flood. How are we going to be able to deal with now multiple types of floods, or floods, droughts followed by floods, or heat waves together with droughts? But it is an important aspect to consider especially as you designed solutions, because the solution that you designed for a flood might not be well equipped for you to deal with a drought. And increasingly, cities will need to cope with both. Strangely enough, even for us up in the Nordics, we're perhaps less used to than our southern neighbors to deal with things like droughts and heat waves. But in fact, you probably know Stockholm is one of the cities where heat waves is rising fastest in Europe. So we will be having to deal with these issues as well. I can go a little bit more in depth later.
Yeah, we have to look at them now, and with the holistic approach that we heard from Lars Strömberg, but also with our previous speakers. Could you tell us a little bit about the team that you have? Because this must require an enormous level of systems thinking, multidisciplinarity. How do you gather people to really make sure there's no blind spots here?
Well, there will always be blind spots, and you have the black swans that you can't tell, but that can't prevent the work from happening. I'll get a little bit more maybe technical in the detail, in my details of the work that's being conducted. We work with engineers, but we also work with social scientists, and for us the absolutely key in our work is actually the municipalities. So we work very, very close with the municipalities who are the ones who experience and have to deal with this firsthand. We work with insurances, we work with industry, and of course the water and wastewater service providers. And what I can tell is that there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of sort of understanding of, especially around floods. What we're less prepared to is apart from dealing from these compound hazards that I referred to, is dealing with the cascading effects from here, from these types of events. So we're used to looking at the primary impact, where the flood will hit, what will get flooded. We're less used to understanding what happens with all the services around. For example, the roads, the power systems that, in case of an outage, which hospitals and schools will be left without services, and how will that impact people preventing from getting to work, for example. And this is an experience that we probably got better acquainted with during the pandemic, where we never thought how important our little ICA, our little supermarket, is for us, or how the pharmacy is so important when the roads are not working, or because there's a snowstorm and nobody can get to work, or whatever. So looking at the cascading effects is super important, and it might feel difficult, but I have some good news. It's actually easier. It can provide some guidelines for municipalities to focus their work. Because when you look at the cascading impacts, it is actually a low percentage of infrastructures that have a huge impact on the rest of your services. So that could help sort of indicate where, if you need to prioritize, where to prioritize.
And when you say this, is it from a Nordic perspective or a global perspective, seeing you have this number, the low percentage number?
We've only looked at it at a case base. This has to be a case-based approach. Yeah. But I would make a similar assumption to most cities. There are hot spots where things cross, and it could be a road, or it could be a wastewater treatment plant, or it could be an important electricity point. And then everything else tends to depend on these hotspots. So I would make the same assumptions to any type of city.
Many models, lots of research coming out of you and your team, so just dig in there. I'm sure there's many useful frameworks. Michaela, so we're talking here about where the natural world meets the social world, social systems, and here comes in the insurance point of view. You must be very busy. What's the insurance perspective that we need to take into account here?
Yeah, well, I'm very happy to be here and represent the insurance perspective. And just to give a little bit of a background for those of you that are not familiar with Zurich Insurance, we are a global insurance provider with headquarters in Switzerland, but we are one of the major players in the global market. And if you think about it, whenever there is an event, whenever there is a natural disaster, a flooding event, we as an insurance provider, we are there. So everything you read in the news, whether they are wildfires or flooding, etc., we are there and we are supporting our clients in these events. This means that we have a lot of knowledge and experience of dealing with these things. We also gives us an opportunity to collect a lot of data and calculating on the cost for these events. So with this combined, we can contribute with our knowledge and our expertise on identifying and assessing the risks. And I think that is one important piece where we can contribute in this broad dialogue. I think both Jonas and Anna was touching upon the need of collaboration, and I don't think we can stress it enough today.
And you must be doing a good job because your department is the fastest growing department, as mentioned. Would you say what's driving this growth? Is it in addition to your skills? Is it top-down regulation driven? Is it market driven? What would you say?
Yeah, well, I would say it's both. So I'm part of what we call Zurich Resilience Solution. It's a risk consulting division of Zurich Insurance. So globally, we are 1,000 risk engineers supporting our clients on identifying and assessing risks. And currently, we see an increasing demand of not looking at the current risk, but also the future risk driven by climate change. And this is, I would say, it's driven by, it's dual. Part of it, for the European companies, is driven by the regulation, the CSRD reporting requirements, for example. That is one factor. But we also see an increasing maturity in terms of understanding that companies need to start their adaptation journey now. And we can support on that. Right. So it's not just a question of compliance, ticking the box exercise, but really about understanding the risk. But to be honest, with the companies that we're working with, I would say there is a broad scope of whether you are on a very mature place in that, or you have just started to realizing, okay, maybe this is something I need to look into.
And maybe it depends on stakeholders' time perspectives. Industry sectors work in sort of different time perspectives here. And how do you work with that when we have events like 50, 100-year events or even 1,000-year events? We heard. How do you calculate, and what time horizon do you work at? It's a question of ontology to you both, actually, here.
Yeah, but I would say we work on both. So we have developed climate data, and we can support our clients to make an analysis of the climate change for their specific locations until the end of the century. However, when climate change, we talk about long term, we usually end up to the end of the century. But from a business perspective, I mean, a business plan is usually 5 years ahead.
Right.
So when talking to our clients, they say for them, long term might be 10 years ahead. Or even stretch it to 20, exactly. But then you're really stretched. Yeah. So here we need to meet, I would say. So we support them on doing the analysis, but I would say that the interesting from at least from the corporate side to doing an analysis that stretches more than 20, 25 years ahead is to some extent limited.
Yeah. How do you have some secret power here to make a 1,000-year event that just happened present and prevailing in the present?
We work with both the long-term and sort of tomorrow type of approaches. As you mentioned, stakeholders are quite varied, and most often the people having to take decisions, they need to take them today for an audience that will vote at the latest in 4 years. Mm-hmm. And so there's a political cycles are very short. So at the same time, there are some demands, and these demands could vary regarding adaptation requirements of newly built areas, for example. Is it a 10-year for a 10-year return period, or is it a 50-year? So that differs a little bit. More technically, we like to work with something called no-regret solutions, which is solutions that can work today, regardless of whether we reach the levels of climate change that we're expecting or not, and solutions that can provide benefits today, like the kind of solutions that Copenhagen City was actually showing. Because the taxpayers of today, kind of, not all of them are willing to pay for the benefits of the next generation. And so it becomes a very difficult trade for decision makers and managers at the municipality level to sell an extremely expensive project that they will never see. Yeah. So it's necessary to work with both time horizons.
Lots of different paradoxes and places in the mind to activate at the same time. No regret moves, that's where our world meets. I use that a lot as well, these moves where you know, regardless of how the future changes, you won't regret that you made those. So speaking of the future, let's make 5 to 10 years and look into your crystal balls. What within this space, not meteorologically, but maybe regulatory or corporate-wise or scientifically, what can we expect coming that we should shed light on and that we're not talking too much about?
Do you want to start?
No.
That's a tough one. Nobody wants to dare making predictions about the future these days. I know that.
I mean, I think there's been a lot of focus on adaptation the past decade. And to some extent, it's been overshadowed by, at least in Europe, by a new narrative on preparedness and security. And as somebody working with risk and specifically water-related hazards, I would like to highlight that a lot of the methods that we have been working on when it comes to climate risk are directly applicable to other types of risks, whether it's a cyber attack or a terror attack or whatever. So I hope that they don't just throw the baby out with the water, is that what you say? That we can make use of all the knowledge that we've built in a completely different scientific field for today's needs. So that's one thing, that there is a danger of that a lot of the climate change work gets replaced by preparedness. Second is, I think we will be a lot better at using digital tools. Right now we are working on getting better tools for forecasting, making better forecasts. At the moment, the forecast for example, droughts, they're terrible, and the droughts forecast for floods are not that great, especially when it comes to the time perspective. We're not able to make predictions too far in advance, but if we could get better at it, then we could plan for the types of crops that we'll be planting in the future, so that we can make decisions in February about should I put my potatoes or not. I don't actually know when you plant potatoes, but point is, if you have at least half a year or something where you can foresee roughly how will I have a dry year, will I have a wet summer, maybe I should buy my holiday somewhere else. Basically, I think having better time to prepare will also lead to better adaptation.
Thank you. Michaela.
Yeah, and taking from another perspective, you're touching upon from the corporate side, and what do we see? I think there is definitely a link to the regulation. And just looking at what happened during this year with the omnibus package that was released in February by the EU, I think during spring I think everyone was a little bit of a shock, at least from the sustainability community. At least that was our experience. So everything was put on hold. What do we do now? But I would say, from what I experienced from my dialogues with my clients, is that okay, there was a short pause, and then like everyone decided, but hey, we have already started, and we will continue. Regardless of the shifting in the regulation, we will continue. So I think there is definitely a positive tone.
I agree to that.
Rather seeing the omnibus package perhaps as a bump on the road than as a showstopper for, as you said, throwing out the baby with the water.
I agree. It seems to be the narrative. And for us that work in the climate adaptation space, knowing to work with the corporate sector, it's good to know who actually mean it. And those who actually mean it are the ones that stand there now still. So it's good to identify the real playmates.
But may I just add another perspective that I would say, in terms of when I describe that there are corporates that might be more mature than others, I would say that working with global players that has sites spread all over the world, I would say they are, from our experience, more mature than the ones that are more concentrated in their operations. So, for example, talking to corporates that may just operate in the Nordics or in Sweden, I would say they are, to some extent, less concerned about climate adaptation processes than the ones that are operating on a global scale.
And that is concerning to you, or?
To some extent, it is concerning. So first of all, I think, we'd already touched upon it here, that climate change and the natural catastrophes will also hit also the northern part of Europe. And we used to say that no one is immune to climate change. We will all be impacted.
Yep.
So it might be a sense of, it feels more secure if it's more close to you than having, for example, a factory in Southeast Asia or India.
Right.
You might be more concerned. Of course, that also goes back to history and historic events. But yeah, sorry, just to add on.
No, it's a great thing to come into perspective, and I think that's also the great segue to Anne and Jonas, that spend so much time on communication and stakeholder management and making sure the risk mindset is alive. So I would like to invite you back up, Anne and Jonas, for some questions from you in the audience. Thank you so much, Michaela, and Carina, you will stay, but I think a little applaud for that first session. Okay. So practically, I'm taking out my computer here, not to write emails, but to see what questions come in from you online. And for you here in the audience, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. We have a mic running around some magical way. So this is truly for you to raise your hand. And we have the gentleman. I think that was it to Jonas? You had a question? Oh, you have loads of questions. Fantastic. Let's start with the first one, and we'll see where we go from
So
there.
first of all, thanks to Stockholm and Copenhagen for arranging this. I'm a Dane living in Stockholm, so it's great to see all the good work you're doing. My name is Christopher Flensburg. I'm head of SEB Water, so the bank SEB's water unit. And I'm also a board member of Civi. Now, Jonas, I had one question with respect to the ownership, so the legal liability. You say that you own 70% of the land, but a lot of that land is rented out, and somebody is building houses on that land. Who owns that liability in that case?
What we're trying to land ownership, what we're trying to do is, of course, when we are the landowner, you can, if you say for a private house owner, they could lease the land and own their house, so to say. What's important is the property itself, and we're talking about what can be managed on the land. We don't intrude on a property owner's land without being allowed to. If the problem comes from the land itself, so to say, the flood issue is generated on these properties and it runs off. It's tied back again to the legal requirements in the jordabalken, for example, that you need to maintain a level of excellence for stormwater management, for example. So you need to manage whatever your property discharges to other properties, so to say. And we're not allowed to build in a way that creates problems, especially not if we're aware that it creates problems. But investment-wise, if looking at protecting the asset of the property, which is mainly the house, not the land, but actually the assets on the land, it comes back to the responsibility of the property owner of the actual asset. So the leasing arrangement, I would say, does not interfere with the legal responsibility, how it's set out, that the property or asset owner is responsible for mitigating the risk. There might be exceptions that haven't been brought into light as yet, but that's the, I would say, the understanding in this sector.
Thank you very much. And by the way, it was extremely appreciated the clear way that you defined how you take decisions. Should I pass it on?
I saw many take pictures of your decision tree there, so maybe even people can get your slides if they ping you.
Can I go on with another question to Anne Lerche?
Sure. Are there any more from the audience? Just so we can identify. Okay, good. No, you can ask another one. I just wanted to make sure that we have not too long to the next one.
So first of all, fantastic work you have been doing. I have two questions. The one is, you didn't describe how much it costed with all the projects you've been putting in place. You said it costed 6 billion with the flooding, but you didn't talk about what it costed to implement what you have been doing. And two, then I'm a little curious. It seems like that you combine the upgrade of the city with a social integration in these fields. If that's the case, how did you do that? And it's successful, by the way.
Thank you.
The price is, it's much quicker to answer than the second question. When we did the plan in 2015, the cost of the entire plan was expected to be 11 million billion Danish kroners, which is equivalent to 1.5 euros. We have, we talked about this yesterday. As so many other things, things has gotten a lot more pricier in the last 10 years. And the last time we evaluated the price, it was around 1.8 billion euros for the entire cost. And the rise in price was mainly due to or connected to the construction of the 6 large cloudburst tunnels. So that was the scheme at that point. There was multiple financial sources in that, but that was the overall cost. and how we do social upgrading while we also cloudburst the areas. In Copenhagen, we have a long history in having like these 4-year urban renewal focuses, and the areas are picked out after a multi-criterial analysis of both income and housing, the quality of the housing, and everything. And when the politicians start to it's always a political decision to start up a new renewal area in Copenhagen, but we know it 2 years in advance. So what we've been doing, what we do when we know that this area, renewal area, is on the verge, is that we assess all the possible benefits of lifting the area, what should be done, and climate adaptation and cloudburst securement is one of them. We also look at, of course, like the urban space, the quality of the institution and the outdoor spaces in general, and also for the road renovation and everything, and we lay them on top of each other. And there's like actually a lot of the major projects that we have been doing in Copenhagen with a climate adaptation perspective on it has been in urban renewal area, because there is a tendency for the politicians to really wanting to boost these areas while the 4-year program is on, and they allocate much more money to these areas if it is in a urban renewal area. So we kind of use this coordination and synergy to together with climate adaptation to lift the entire area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very satisfying answer. I think the price question, though, I'd like to hear from Karina and Michaela as well. How do you build, so for example, mega projects like Slussen we talked about, how do you build a cost-benefit analysis for that in a changing world where adaptation is getting increasingly urgent, technologies are changing as well, both for the good and for the bad. So how do you build in the right risk assessment, cascading effects, compounding hazards, all of these things when you built the investment case?
Well, from a strict insurance perspective, we do calculate the risk from a construction project, for example, but we do have a more of a short-term perspective because it's for the lifetime of the policy.
Right.
From an adaptation perspective, of course, you must have a longer time horizon, and that's why we also support our clients, but more on a consulting basis, on also how to calculate those risks.
Right.
That goes beyond the lifelong of the policy.
Right, to keep the flexibility there. Karina, some.
And in terms of the cascading effects, we're actually working on that. So in half a year, maybe next water week, I'll be able to come back with some costs of what are the costs of the cascading effects.
Yeah.
But what I can say is regarding solutions, we wanted to understand how do municipalities work with getting green and blue solutions into their design. And Sweden is very digital. There's a lot of information online. So we started with those sources that were available and found out that it's very difficult to budget for example, nature-based solutions. There's nothing called nature-based solutions even. Everything has its own name, whether it's a wetland or a green roof or something. And there's no sort of schablon, like standardized prices for these things. There's no comparable metrics. There's projects that are missing in these databases. So if Stockholm wants to put a wetland somewhere, it's up to whatever the supplier is offering, because there's nothing to go back to and there's no comparison. And that leaves municipalities in a very vulnerable position, and in the position that they have to accept whatever the supplier or the provider of the service is giving them. So maybe, I know there's perhaps no one taking decisions here, but it would be very good for you to have a system where you can compare what's a cost per square meter or what's the cost of the green roof, and get that. It would be easier for you to procure for those services that today are very difficult. So everybody ends up procuring for walls because there are prices for that. We know what the construction material is. but we don't know exactly how much a green roof or a bigger green area will cost.
And the benefits that are so much beyond the actual solutions.
And the benefits, I could speak a lot
Yeah.
about that, but somebody spoke about the multiple benefits, and there are so many multiple benefits that municipalities are not yet considering.
Yeah.
Everything from air quality, dampen noise, and all of these things. But it might not be so easy to get those co-benefits. It might actually be difficult for municipalities to deal with. Okay, if there's so many benefits, it ends up falling between the chairs. So who owns the question?
Exactly. And get those that own those agendas in the room. You have a question, gentleman here in the back and then in the front?
Yeah, I totally forgot what I should ask because the discussion.
Because it was a good discussion, yeah?
Yeah. But I really like the Jonan's designation is really good. Cloudburst resilience strategies. I've never heard like this position. Very fascinating presentation. But I just was seeing in the Google search about the population of city of Stockholm is like 2 million, I believe, less than 2 million.
It's 1 million in Stockholm and 2
1 million,
in the greater region.
So what should be your strategy being a cloudburst strategist to advise for a city like Delhi with 20 million people? And what would be the cost of investment Annie can provide us? And just imagine there is also a lot of informal settlements and people. You nicely presented the problem of cloudburst. We do see the cities running with lack of drinking water because there is a lot of groundwater issues and other. So how do you couple this excess water and then what is the innovation that we should bring, because there is increasingly climate change impact that Karina was referring to, and how this overall model is also been by the insurance industry as well, because in many parts of the world everybody do their work independently. And so just want to know, is there is any engagement between the insurance sector for different infrastructure, and the same model is being adapted for number of others, mainstreaming process of that, so that we know the model inputs are quite reliable to do the payment for services on that.
Oh, the full stack here. And to cover some ground, we'll ask you to keep questions or answers deep but brief.
Yep.
That's the billion-dollar answer here.
If it's just a brief one about saying like we got Stockholm and then we have an enormous expansion to Indian cities. The most important part of my work is communication, which leads to capacity building, to get a basic understanding for the processes on how you need to work individually, accepting what are you responsible for, what's other part of society responsible for. And that's a big part of all these investigations, like creating awareness on where the risks lie, but also creating awareness that mitigating those risks can be, you can have a 1 to 100 economic benefit to these projects. Those are the ones that are the easiest to fix. And those are the ones you have to be ashamed of that you didn't fix if something happens. It is super easy to fix not flooding an underground subway station. You need to have flood-proof doors, and you need to have an organization that has a preparedness to close off those doors. It's all you need to do, and then protecting ventilation and pressure shafts. Then it's done, and it's a 100 million crown risk reduction from a 1 million crown investment. Insurance companies don't need to know where there is blue on a map. Insurance companies need to know what is the actual risk relative to other assets on the map. That's what we're doing, for example, in collaboration with national insurance companies, some banks. What do you need from us? They need to know what is the economic risk that they are sitting on. So do the banks, and they need to transfer that to defaults on property loans. So we need to bring in the perspective, what do you need in order to work more efficient? And then that might translate to higher premiums on insurances, and that's something that probably needs to happen, but it needs to happen in a controlled way based on the correct information, not as a knee-jerk reaction when something's happened and people are left without insurances. It needs to be introduced so people can adapt and people do not have this dragging long-term consequences with physical suffering and personal defaults.
Thank you.
Not a short answer.
Yeah, no, but it's also not a very complex area, so it's a hard ask. Michaela, Jonas was pointing towards you. You nodded your head. Do you agree, or is there aspects we need to?
I agree, and I'm coming back to, I think it was your second point on the list of what's needed to agree, is to agree on what is unacceptable risk. And I would call it as when you're above your risk tolerance. And we need to work on to identify that spot, so we can support from our side, and you work from your side, because that is one important piece to come to the conclusion, and also on what to agree on. But also giving the perspective of what's uninsurable. We talk a lot about that. I can talk for Zurich, at least we will always cover natural hazards. However, we do calculate the risk, so it might come with an increased premium, but that could also be a way of pushing adaptation measures, because we can demonstrate the alternative cost of not doing.
What is
Again.
uninsurable is also something we need to take into account. Wow. You have the mic here, and then in the front, and then we have one question in the back. I hope we'll get through all of them. If questions also can be deep and brief. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I'll try to be quick. Finn Boyle, I work for Jacobs as the Digital Director for Europe, but spent the last 10 years working in a UK water utility. My question actually builds on Karina's point around costs and predictability, especially for nature-based solutions. I wonder, how do you look to ensuring the maintenance of the solutions that are installed across the city, and also the outcomes that come with them? Because the studies we see in the UK show that the quality, the water quality that comes out of nature-based solutions is fairly consistent, but that the quantity drops over time. And I'm interested, for a city-wide deployment, who covers the cost of those, and how is that managed?
For us,
Yeah.
or
It seems like it's
I
for
think I
many
need to
here.
the cost of the maintenance of the
Of the nature-based solutions, the green roads, or
okay. As the legislation has been in Copenhagen, and it's also possible for the municipality of Copenhagen to we do the maintenance of the projects, but what has to do with the handling of the water, we can actually send the bill to the utility company for that as well. And I could have a whole session about that, because it's not very easy. Also, because you never have just technical solutions that need to be maintained when they are on the surface. They are always built into green areas, the public spaces. We have also had a big need to use new innovative solutions, try something that we have never tried before when we do surface projects, and the maintenance of them is not necessarily known, or and there's a lot of opinions about how it should be done and if it's a good or a bad solution. We also have the how long time they last issues, because when we do the financing, it's expected that the surface project would have a lifetime of 100 years, and things on the surface never last 100 years. But that is what you can build into economic models and finance models and everything, and who should then pay for it when it should be renewed, so it will last as long as it will.
Jonas wants to riff off of that.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, I agree. What we look at, like, what's the motivation for nature-based solution? When you're looking at a cloudburst perspective in a densely populated city, a lot of impermeable surfaces, what do you want to achieve? And I come back to this tunnel example. If we got major flooding of an infrastructure tunnel, my go-to is, let's see if we can wall that off. And there might be other properties surrounding it. I say we want to do investments as well. Great. The regional transport authority, you do that investment. You do not contribute to the natural solutions, because they have a demand to safeguard their asset with a much higher requirement and continuity, where they have charge of the level of protection. They need to feel safe for 100 years that their asset is protected. They cannot rely on the council to maintain nature-based solutions to a degree, and to make those solutions robust enough that you eliminate the risk that they are concerned with. So this is, when we try to talk about nature-based solutions, as a risk mitigation tool in a dense city, I am very, very skeptical to the cost efficiency of it, because if, especially from a maintenance perspective, there's zero maintenance of a wall, and some organization has to maintain the asset, and a nature-based solution has a lot of maintenance. You can use it, but it's very difficult to eliminate a consequence using NBS in a dense city.
Thank you, Jonas. I know there was a follow-up, but I'm also looking at you, Karina, because this is your field of expertise, NBS, nature-based solutions, and how to balance with grey engineered solutions. I want to riff off of Jonas there, and we'll get the mic to travel to this gentleman in the front. Yeah.
Just going to be short because I know we're running out of time, but I think when I was saying, talking about the costs, it is exactly that. We don't have the cost for maintenance either. How much does it cost? Whereas the maintenance costs and routines for any type of grey infrastructure, they're embedded already and we know them. So I wonder how much it is that, I mean, all infrastructure needs some type of maintenance and refreshing or painting or something, but those we know and are there, but with nature-based solutions, they're not. And Sweden had an experience for some years ago where a lot of wetlands were built, and then we don't know where they are, kind of. We don't know where they are maintained or what happened with them. At some point, they will start emitting instead of absorbing emissions, for example. So absolutely, it needs to be part of the business model, the maintenance and the full cycle of managing these solutions. Now, I agree, they're not the panacea, and I think what we see in our models is that you have to have the right solution in the right spot. In some places, there will be gray might be the main, blue might be, or green might be the main, but they might also be able to amplify the effects of adaptation in other places. And I did a different session on the gentleman up there regarding the question about India. Is all this discussion is very much focused on the centralized infrastructure, but India has great experiences with decentralized and alternative types of services that one could get into on another session.
Okay, a little cliffhanger there. Gentleman in the front.
Thank you very much. I think this was very, very interesting. I just wanted to, partly was covered by the colleague from India, how transferable are these experiences to other countries like North-South, because I see you all from the North. So I think it's very important. By the way, my name is Daniel. I'm from the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. And one option is, I think for me, how do you see it? Are you ready to do something, or are you doing it already just to showcase maybe like this city-to-city partnership? The other thing is, thanks to Karina who mentioned drought, but you did not mention the two of you especially. Is drought going to be an issue in Copenhagen and Stockholm? Are you prepared for it? How do you try to look into these two disasters, like harvesting the flood into the times of drought, for example? And there are a lot of small-scale good solutions in the south, even just trying to do this artificial groundwater sequestration to use in times of drought. So I just wanted to see a reflection on that. Thank you.
I think drought, that's where you kind of, Denmark, yes?
Yeah, but also here in Stockholm. So we haven't done that much consideration of how to protect the city of Copenhagen against drought. Also, we have no food production. So the discussion is very much on the public health in heat wave situation. But we have experiences with catching up the rainwater and using it for watering plants all over the city, also in quite a large scale. And we want to do much more of it. In the new strategy that we are making next year, we'll have a lot more goals and for implementing measures to try and make the city cooler in the summer. But one of the big things that we haven't got a grasp on is how we're going to make an infrastructure where we keep the water from the wet period all the way until we get a drought situation. And it's definitely a challenge that will be one we will see into for the next many years. And if you have good examples, I would be very glad to hear about them.
I think there's an invitation to continue the dialogue, and in respect of time, I think I'll just sneak in the final question. And I know you had one, but let's use that for the coffee break, and I'm sure you will stay. So really an invitation. My final question to all of you is: what is the one question you wish more people would ask you in this space? Sometimes it's good to end off with a question.
May I be a bit bold and start? Yeah. And I think it's not a question to myself, but rather to themselves. If everyone can start asking, what risk am I exposed to, depending on, of course, which organization or company or what you represent, and then what can I do about it? And if you cannot answer those questions, reach out for collaboration, because we can work on this together.
That's the imperative. Carina?
What would I do if the systems that I rely on today would stop working?
Dare take that contemplation into our minds and hearts. Jonas?
I would I will replace what they would ask with initiative they should take, and it is that initiative to collaborate, to find a common solution to problems.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I think it would be to how can I agree with you also. This how can I take action, and how can we get even more involved in this and take ownership of the municipal strategies and plans? There is a tendency for them just to be out there, and then people expect the cities or the organization and institutions to fix it, but it's never done with that. In Copenhagen, we own, I think, around 25% of the land. You cannot climate adjust the city on 25% of the land, and if so what can I do, and what is my responsibility also, and how can I help the plan? How can I help to realize it?
Yeah, take action. Take
action.
a climate action, very much on brand with this year's theme of the World Water Week. So that's the open invitation for you. Maybe some of you will dare to ask those questions to you afterwards. Thank you, Michaela Grundberg, Carina Barkett, Jonas Althage, och Annie Läger Jansen. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, in wrapping up this session, we hope you've had a lot of value, a lot of questions. Sometimes the more you know, the less you know. So if there's more questions coming out of the session than answers, maybe that's a good sign. For me, at least, I've learned that water is certainly an interconnector of many agendas, disciplines, and also this contemplation about cities and water. Right? How do we maybe learn from water? Cities built for permanence, water that learns us of impermanence. I would like to thank very much the World Water Week for allowing us to be here, the City of Stockholm for hosting the session, our brilliant speakers, as well as Lars Strömberg, who opened this session. And thank you, dear participants, both here in the room and at home, for steering the dialogue where you needed it to go. I hope this is not the last time we see each other. Thank you.